Welcome to the War Academy channel. Today we have a really curious program about an aspect that can be very superstitious, of which we do not know to what extent it influenced the result of the military operations of the Second World War. Without a doubt, we have all heard of magic and occult powers in relation to this stage of history, which may well fall into the category of mystery and speculation. But what we are going to report today are completely contrasted facts, and that really happened. Before coming to the prophecies that told Hitler what the outcome of the war was going to be, even if it started, let's go back to the oldest ones, which announced very early on that a new conflict was going to break out in 1939. It was specifically the German philosopher and historian Oswald Spengler, who, shortly after the end of the First World War, announced that a new conflict of an even greater scale would break out in Europe, specifically in 1939. This calculation was made as a result of adding 25 years to the start date of the Great War. Well, this was the time he needed to form a new generation. Oswald also includes the concept that history was a continuous succession of cultures, which were replacing each other, with an approximate duration of a millennium. This idea was incorporated by Hitler, who began to sell the Third Reich of 1,000 years. Finally, this historian indicated that the entire culture needed 3 great wars to consolidate or to disappear. After the Franco-Prussian War and the First World War, it was understood that the new war of 1939 would end up totally consolidating German culture. In addition to Oswald, there was also a priest in the 3rd century before Christ, named Berosus, who prophesied that within 2,300 years, coinciding with the 20th century, there would be a great armed confrontation that would devastate the world. Another prophecy was that of the nun Gandersheim, who in the 10th century specifically said the following: "A century after the fall of the Emperor of France, restorer of the Holy Empire, born on an island, and died on an island, a century will come that will be terrible. The peoples will fall under you, Germania, and your power will be so great that the whole world will ally against you." We could spend hours commenting on prophecies of all kinds that were made about the outbreak of this war, because I assure you that there are hundreds. However, most do not make it clear what the result of it will be, since they only announce the start. What we are going to see next are the prophecies of various private astrologers, who were consulted in the 1930s by people who belonged to Hitler's circle. First of all, we must point out an event known to all and that arose from these tarot consultations. It happened specifically on April 13th, when Goebbels heard the news that US President Roosevelt had died. The first thing he did was telephone Hitler, who was in his bunker in Berlin, and told him the following: "My Führer, I congratulate you. Roosevelt is dead. It is written in the stars that in the second half of April everything will be fine. We meet on Friday, April 13th, and it will be from here when everything begins to change." This was the last straw, which the German leaders clung to in those desperate days, without being fully aware that there were only a few hours left before the Soviets would throw everything on Berlin. Based on this, let's see where Goebbels got the confidence in this signal, which made him believe that everything was about to change and that finally, Germany would be saved. It all started in the early 1930s, when an astrologer had prophesied Hitler's rise to power in 1933. However, this was not the astrologer's only prophecy, as he also announced that a new European war would break out in 1939. Going even further there, I predict that until the year 1941, all would be great victories for Germany, later going on to suffer a series of defeats. The hardest blows that Germany would suffer would continue until the first months of 1945, in which the worst for the Germans would end. Starting in the middle of the year, this being April and May, there would be a great victory for the Germans, bringing all sides to a draw. After this, by August 1945, peace would be signed. This was the information that had been extracted in Germany in the early 1930s, based on the interpretation of the stars. Surprisingly, we can see that everything was fulfilled quite accurately, except for the signing of a final peace favorable to the Germans. But even so, he was right with the date of August 1945 in which the peace would be signed, since it was finally on September 2nd when the Second World War ended. The date of the death of the American president was interpreted as that signal that indicated the beginning of the great victory for Germany, since, in some way, the United States was expected to abandon the conflict, or until they became its new allies, against the Soviets. Obviously, we do not know to what extent these predictions were taken seriously by the German leaders, and we do not know to what extent they were able to influence their decisions. I personally believe that at first they were not taken into account at all, and that was when everything began to turn against Germany, when these prophecies were rescued, because in the end they alluded to a good ending for the Germans. Be that as it may, and although all this series of prophecies have infinite interpretations, it is clear that for many centuries, many prophets indicated that the 20th century was going to be marked by enormous wars, such as humanity had never experienced before. Finally, it is also evident that these last prophecies that we have seen were almost exactly fulfilled, and could give a last hope to certain German leaders, who undoubtedly needed them. Well, what do you think? Do you give any value to this type of astrological interpretations, or do you consider that everything is the result of chance? Do you know any other prophecy that announced what was going to happen in the 20th century, and that has been fulfilled with total accuracy? I leave you in the description a program that we made a few months ago about the Ahnenerbe, which has generated so much mystery during the last decades. And well, this video ends here. Thank you all very much, especially the sponsors who make this possible. Subscribe and share this program if you liked it, and see you in the next one. See you soon.